Welcome to Relationship Advice. My name is Lauren. I am joined by my friends and co-hosts Cayla and Colter, and we have a very special guest joining us today. Someone who, spoiler alert, is not a couples therapist, not a couples coach. We're bringing a really interesting, different angle and perspective to the conversation today. And before we jump in, if you're new here, I just want to remind our listeners who are familiar with us and anybody who's joining for the first time that Cayla, Colter, and I are three therapists. We are so passionate about helping individuals connect to themselves so that they can better connect to others and really feel equipped to live their fullest, best lives. We really value education and information, and also as relationship experts want to remind our listeners that information does not in and of itself translate to transformation. And so we always want to encourage people to find ways to experientially be in connection with others. We have a couple ways that you can do this through joining a 10-day couples challenge. If you want to sign up in our show notes for you and your partner to jump right into some experiential practices with one another, we have a platform called Relationship Academy where you can come and engage and ask questions and talk with others and learn from Cayla and Colter and I more in practice. And today we're going to be in conversation talking about some of the existential questions of reality, and based on how we view reality, how does that translate to our relationships? So I want to intro our guest, Dr. Tony Nader. He is a neuroscientist, physician, New York Times bestselling author, and internationally recognized expert on consciousness and human development. Dr. Nader earned his PhD in brain and cognitive sciences from MIT and completed clinical training at Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Nader is the author of the NYT bestseller Consciousness is All There Is, and his new book that's recently come out is called The Power of Caring. Dr. Nader's work explores the question of what is reality, and then given the nature of reality, how should we live? So I am incredibly excited to jump into this. I don't know if Colter and Cayla know this, but I love existential conversations. Well, Colter knows this. I don't know if
Yeah,
Cayla
I know
does.
that. I mean, that's like,
I'm like, this
I
is
love
like our
it too.
shared special interest. Yeah. I'm like, phenomenology. What is reality? Like, let's dive in. So, Tony, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a joy.
And for our listeners to know too, you're joining us from southern France. Actually, all
Yes.
four of us are coming from different parts of the world today. I guess the three of Colter and Cayla and I are all in the United States, but in different parts at this very moment.
But I know we've got a big international following. I think in Relationship Academy, there's like 20 different countries represented already.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
which is very cool.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your success. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we are interested to jump right into this conversation and hear some of what you have to share, a different perspective, like we mentioned, from what we're usually talking about on this podcast, as far as how our relationships are impacted by pressure and, feeling emotionally depleted and the things that impact our consciousness and that kind of conversation. So Dr. Nader, we are excited to hear from you and something new for our listeners today.
Maybe something new would be to say that caring, love, relationship is most successful when it comes from an inner ground that is settled. Maybe this is not new for you, but it is a very important aspect. Whether new or old, it is something that is fundamental to start with. And that inner ground, that inner settled self, has implications on how our brain works, how our nervous system reacts, how we see things. And I would say it's removing the glasses, the colored glasses that have taints in them that prevent you from seeing the proper things in the proper time and the proper sequence, and to be balanced within oneself as a fundamental aspect of any relationship. That is one point. Another point I would say is, because you talked about reality and all of that, is that in the ultimate reality of what life is about and how we live it, my research and understanding of the mind-body connection, consciousness, and physiology, after going through a lifetime, literally, of looking into philosophy, physics, into biology, into the brain, how it works, into spirituality, to come to a quick conclusion, there is a field of being which is consciousness. And that consciousness appears as many, like an ocean, appears as many waves. So when you are looking for a relationship between one wave and another, if you are stuck on the wave as an individual that is separate from every other wave, of course, complications can come. One wave seems to threaten the other or be in a difficult place. But if you go deeper, and that brings me back to the first point, if you go deeper into the self, which is the ocean that produces the waves, then in a natural, spontaneous way, you start seeing the other as yourself. And that is the most profound and powerful basis for relationship to be on the highest possible level.
There are so many things, Tony, that you're saying that I want to dive more into. And I think the place that this does align with what we talk about on our show is we use this term individuation to help listeners explore how we connect with ourselves, how we really understand what it is like to be us, is a place where we want to get grounded and organized to then be able to bring curiosity to others in the same way that we would bring to ourselves, to be able to prioritize that sense of safety. I'm hearing you name a concept that I've heard probably with so many different names just across modalities and spiritualities. In the therapy world, a lot of times we say like capital S self versus ego, or in the yoga world, we say ego versus Purusha, like this concept that when you're talking about inner grounding, it's this grounding to not just me as one individual, but being connected to something more. Am I getting that right as you were saying it?
Absolutely on the spot.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, so that piece does feel new to bring to the conversation. We talk so much about, like mentioned, if I'm focusing on one wave that feels threatened by another wave, like that's a lot of the work we do in the couples therapy realm. Can you describe more, like where do you bring people in if this is new to them, to trying to understand this concept of get grounded in yourself, you're connected to more than just you and your ego?
First is to realize that relationship, love, care, connection flows through a system. The system has two levels that look like. One is subjective, the mind, consciousness, and the other is the physiology. They look as if they are two different things, but they are a continuation one of the other. Mind and body are not just intimately connected, they are different expressions of who we are. And so when we have a connection, when we have a relationship, it flows through that system. So if the system is saturated, if the system is overburdened, if the system is overwhelmed, if the system is carrying a lot rather than truly caring from the inside, then what flows is not going to be ideal. And that we know physiologically. I'm sure you've discussed this many times. If we are living in a situation of overregulation or stress or pain, the parts of the nervous system that deal with sympathy, with patience, with humor, with generosity, with connectedness, are shut down because the system is going into a fight or flight response. So the frontal cortex is shutting down, and the amygdala and the limbic system come up. Under such circumstance, whatever the intention is, and you might have the best words you have learned to say, the best things you have, thought to use in your relationship, if they flow through that, it will be always tainted by a quality that is a fight or flight or freeze response or saturated response, which means you don't have space anymore within you to take in or to discuss things. And so that is where self-regulation in a very natural way is necessary. And I suggest and I teach different techniques for that.
A lot of people come to our show because they're wanting to connect better with other people in their lives. They want to improve oftentimes their romantic relationships, but all of the relationships in their life. And it sounds like you're, help me understand if I'm getting this right, but you're basically saying that even if you have learned all the words, you've learned all the phrases, and you know the moves, if you do not have that inner groundedness and that connection to yourself first, it's almost futile.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I'm saying right that because because people feel, it's not through the words only. When we exchange something with someone, it's also the expressions on the face, maybe the
Yes.
pheromones that we radiate, the fears that we have inside. We can try to, to make it look good, but ultimately it doesn't come across as something really nurturing. So we have to have space within in order to be able to accept the other and care for the other. And this is where the difference between caring and carrying comes. Carrying can be a form of love, but it exhausts the person and it doesn't lead ultimately to the best outcome.
You mentioned just a moment ago that without self-regulation, then we won't have that space to have this connection with others. And I think that's something that we've shared pretty often on the podcast. I think people have a good concept of that. But then you had said, and then there's these techniques that I recommend to help open up that space and engage in that self-regulation to move towards connection. And immediately I felt very interested in what techniques those are, because I think that's, as a couples therapist, that's some of the things that come into my office so often is, well, okay, Cayla, I need to self-regulate, but like, what do you mean by that? And what's the best way to do that? And so I wonder if we could talk more about some of those techniques that you recommend.
For one thing, even simple sitting down, sitting in a chair, the same chair every day, without the phone, without anything, letting your, shoulders fall down, close the eyes or look at a distance at something without trying to regulate anything, without trying to find calm or to find silence or to find anything. Just being in that state for even 5 minutes, maybe twice a day, can already reset a little bit the system. Now, there are more advanced techniques, of course. This is very simple. Take a deep breath, let it out. I'm sure you're very familiar, which you are, of course, with all of these techniques. The technique that I personally practice and that I encourage people to take is what we call transcendental meditation. To transcend means to go beyond. And, when you practice techniques like mindfulness, you take a thought and you let thoughts come without judgment, or you put your attention on the breath going in and out without judgment, take it as it comes. This is also very helpful. Transcendental meditation is to transcend, which means to go beyond all thoughts, all feelings, all memories. And that is what happens naturally when you allow the mind to go inward and use this special technique to transcend with, that allows you to settle down to the inner state. You mentioned Purusha, or we can call it Atman, because you use these Sanskrit Vedic terms, which are beautiful, rather than Jivan or Ahamkar or the small ego, the big self. So the big self, where is it? It is somewhere inside. And the big self is beyond any memory, any limited aspect of existence, any problem, any even expectation or hope or desire. It is the source of all intelligence and creativity. And it is something which is our inner self, our true inner being. Our true inner being, when we say know thyself, it doesn't mean just know your qualities and your shortcomings, and so you can know how to behave because you know you can do this, but you cannot do that. Fine, this is part of it, could be part of it. But knowing the true self, which you mentioned with a big S, is discovering that we are beyond all of that. And what this does is truly reset the entire system. So if we say, like, there is an ocean and the waves on the surface we just mentioned, transcending is diving deep into the ocean. And the ocean in this case is the mind, is consciousness. As the ocean gets quieter when you go deeper and deeper, it's the same in consciousness. The mind, as it settles down, gets deeper and quieter, and goes beyond the subconscious and the unconscious and reaches that state of direct experience of the big self. And that happens because the nature of the mind is to search for more. We're always searching for more, but we search for more on the outside. We want things to hear that are musical or beautiful or harmonious or beautiful words. We want, love. We want from the outside. We want connectedness. We want knowledge. We want beautiful things to eat, to smell, to do. We are projecting through our senses always to the outside. And the mind is looking for more, always looking for more, always looking for more. It doesn't know that more than the most is something within. And so by diving deep within, without manipulating the mind, without trying to create silence or without trying to transcend, because when we teach transcendental meditation, we say trying is prohibited. But there is a technique, and that technique allows the mind to actually settle down. When it settles down, the body also settles down. That gives a deep state of rest, which we call restful alertness. At the same time, we are deeply rested, but very awake. And that's how deep stresses are released. And the space within becomes much wider. And then care flows from the inside out.
So much of what you're describing, we on this show talk about having 4 pillars for secure relationships. And the first pillar, we use Dan Siegel's term window of tolerance. And you're describing that, right? Like we have to have enough of that regulation for the amygdala to be calm enough that our front brain can be, thinking and strategizing and choosing and paying attention. Something that feels so new about what you're saying, though, is that piece of like, let go of the trying. Because I think that trying oftentimes connects to that like fight impulse that we feel of like, okay, I need to do something to get the distress down and I need to change. And you're saying if you can allow yourself to just be in some space without a goal, without having to achieve or change, and just like spend some time with that not trying in and of itself can help bring us into our window of tolerance to calm that nervous system.
It's beautifully said with just one comment.
Please.
And that is during the meditation, during the time of the practice. Otherwise people feel, and this has been misunderstood even in the ancient Vedic tradition and in India, that it means even when you are living life, you should just let go, you shouldn't control, you shouldn't try, because nature is taking care and all of that. That is what I would call mood making. When you are in life, you try what you know. You use your intelligence, you use what you learned. You can, of course, guide your life. But in order to have this happen on a platform of great stability and strength from within, during the meditation process, you have to let go in a specific way. Of course, there is a technique to learn that allows the mind then to settle down and go beyond. That's why we call it transcendental. To transcend is to go beyond. And so there it's absolutely right. No expectation, no anticipation, no trying, no forcing, no concentration, no manipulation. It's like, oh, so what do we do? It's a technique that we learn. And It
Yeah.
uses a mantra, a sound that has no meaning, and it's a specific sound that allows the mind to settle in a natural way within.
I've got two things I want to say. First is you have an energy and a kindness about you that just the moment that you hopped on the screen, we're doing this interview over video, but we kind of talked a little bit at the beginning that someone can know all the right words to say, but there's this feeling that you get when speaking with someone, and I just want to say I feel, and I know Lauren and Cayla very well, so I'm going to speak for all three of us, how grounded we all feel, this
Yes.
calmness. And,
Mhm.
we have a lot of people reach out to be on the show and potential guests. And there's oftentimes kind of this energy that we can feel, whether that feels good or it doesn't feel good. And I don't know if I can really describe it that well, other than just like what my nervous system feels. And I just want to comment on how you can even exude that several thousand miles away. Um, just through the way that you show up on camera.
Mhm.
You're very kind. It's very touching.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm glad that's received. The second thing I want to say is a question. So as we're talking about the true self, I have a 2-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. And I think about the true self. I usually use the term the core self. I've always kind of imagined, and I want to hear your perspective on this. I'm very open to being wrong. I've kind of always imagined that they were sort of born with that true self. Like they just are exactly who they are, and there is nothing for them to necessarily get to. But I kind of know as they get older, they will lose some of that, or at least I suspect that they will lose that, and then they will have to listen to this episode so they can get back to that. Is that? I'd just love to hear your perspective on that.
Well, there is research on that. It's not just an opinion. When even the vision, the feeling, for the newborn, the whole world is one ocean of being, and they don't even have a sense of me being separate. We all have had this experience, those at least who have children, to know that the child starts talking about themselves in a third person at the beginning, he or she or they, and that is because they realize this is part of the being, the whole being, and they don't have an ego that has collapsed into that particular body and that particular individual. And through people interacting with them and always treating them as a separate individual, because that's how it works, then they start saying, yes, I and me and like that. And the sense of the small self emerges. So you're completely on the right track.
I will say my 2-year-old daughter, her name is Truly, and she constantly refers to, if she wants to do something, she says, truly do it.
Yes,
That's very
exactly
cute.
that. Exactly that.
Mhm.
It's like we are a field and there are these people, and Truly is one of them,
She's just one of them. Yeah,
Mhm.
she's just
Yeah.
like I am. She's just one of the people.
Right.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's like the wave saying, I'm the ocean, and there are so many waves. And this wave they call Truly, and this wave they call Sarah, and this wave
Mhm.
they call something else.
Yeah.
I want to try to land the plane in this area that we are right now for the listeners, as far as if they were to buy into this idea and move into this shared consciousness or improve their consciousness. How will that help their relationship? If they're really kind of like, okay, this guy's making some sense. I can see what he's saying, but why would I then want to do that in terms of my relationship? How will that support the health of my relationship?
See, when your nervous system is in a survival mode, the person you love starts to look like a threat, whether
Yes.
intellectually you realize it or not. You're in a
Yes.
survival mode. Your brain is looking at the threat. And this is not a character flaw. That's very important to realize. It's not like they're failing or they're not right or like that. This is really just biology. As we discussed, different parts of the brain, they get activated. And then the same things, the same sentence, you forgot the bread again, or you forgot the milk, lands in one way as a playful teasing when the nervous system is regulated,
Yes.
and as an attack when it is not. So the partner didn't change, the listening system changed. And, most couples are not having fights about bread, milk, laundry, or in laws. They're having fights about being overcapacity. And they use, the bread, the milk, the in laws as the surface expression. So, also on another level, chronic stress also compresses time, which means little things become urgent, small tones become big.
Mhm.
Every request feels like one more thing, you know? So if both people arrive at the conversation already at low capacity,
Yes.
the conversation cannot afford even 1%, a little percent of friction. And relationships always have some friction, which we have to understand. So we have to realize also and be compassionate about ourselves and know that if you're carrying, and this is really an important part, if you're carrying more than just caring, you're carrying, and people think that caring means to carry other person's problems, which means if you don't feel like them, if you don't think all day about their anxiety, if you don't ruminate the problems that they have, maybe you are insensitive, maybe you are not connected. And that's really what carrying is about. You should give freedom to the other to carry their things. And what you should do is care by being present, listening. I'm here for you. There is a storm, but we're together. We're going to walk it through together, and give that level of assurance rather than get oneself overwhelmed and then burn out, and then we cannot give except what we have. If we have happiness, we can give happiness. If we have strength, we can give strength. If somebody's sitting sad and crying, and you come and you sit next to them and you start crying because you have compassion and empathy. We started with one person crying, now we have two people crying. What we want is somebody to uplift, to be happy, to accept to be strong, to accept to be regulated and settled, and not have this guilt feeling that, I should feel with them. And also it takes away from their freedom to deal with their things. We treat them like a child or somebody that needs to be carried, which we don't want. They want your support, they want your love, but they have to have the right to deal with their situation.
Yeah. I think that is something I really need to hear. I can struggle with that idea, and I love the language of caring versus carrying. And I've had a number of people in my life, for whatever reason, in this season going through difficult things, and it caused me to seek out some of my own therapy. And I came to this understanding that the reason I was having so much difficulty engaging with it was because I wanted to solve all of those problems. That the person would call me and there was no news, there was no update. So, there's nothing new for us to do and nothing to work on. And I would find myself getting really frustrated. My therapist asked me, is that your job? Is that what your job is to do? Like, what if you were just with that person? And it's a tough concept. I wonder, why do you think that is tough for people to do, to just sit there and just be with it?
Because we are wired to care, and which is a wonderful thing to have. Our human species has evolved because we supported each other and we survived stronger species in the jungle or in life or whatever, and beasts and all of that. Why? Because we were sensitive to each other. And that has built up, evolution has promoted those changes in the nervous system that allow empathy. For example, there are mirror neurons in the brain. You see somebody suffering, and what happens in their brain is actually starts happening in your brain. There is a synchronicity that happens. And evolution has favored that so that we work together, we feel together. And that's why you get actually when you care properly, consciously, in a nice way, you get oxytocin that is secreted, which is a bonding hormone. You get dopamine that is secreted, which is a reinforcement so that you can repeat the action. You get serotonin and endorphin, which are feel-good hormones. Your parasympathetic system is kindly balanced and activated. And so this is part of the system. So when this is taken to a level where it is automatic and reflex and not regulated, which means not conscious caring, but just pure empathy that builds up, the actual physiology starts to get tired. And out of wanting to do something good, because we've talked now about the wiring in the system, but there is another system of caring that comes into play, and that is what is the right thing to do. The kind of emotional and moral obligation. What would a good person do? What we have learned that a good person should do in this situation. And unfortunately, trouble also comes from that area because we kind of exaggerate that and we learned, oh, you should be compassionate, you should be, okay, fine, I should be, but should I carry this? Or can I do something? It's like we said, the person sitting and being in distress. And we think the best way is to sit and be in distress with them and get our mirror neurons fired, and we feel tired and like that, and nobody benefits. You can help. What is important when somebody is in distress is not how you feel, really, although you will feel with them. Of course, compassion and empathy is natural. It's what you will do to help them. It's what you will do to support them. And if you lose yourself, you will not support them. So responsibility for oneself, caring for oneself, and not carrying the world problems, which we feel like everybody is now trying to carry every problem around the world. And that's why we have everywhere overwhelm and fatigue and, burnout, etc. So we have to separate these two.
One of the things I was thinking is, as you were describing that connectivity between, we're wired to care when we see somebody in distress. I also was thinking about how if we have not had support in learning how to regulate ourselves and how to be grounded, I think a lot of times we see that it's like, I'm crying with you, or I'm trying to fix your crying because your crying is distressing to me, and that's the way to fix my own distress, versus knowing how to be grounded and present. And I see that play out, I think, a lot in couple cycles where it's like neither one of us ever learned how to be the strong, steady, present, resourced one. And so we're both expecting the other person to be that for us. Does that fit with what you're describing?
Yes, exactly. And there are many reasons why we do that. As you're saying, is one example. Another example is it becomes control, for example, and that is based on this different systems of attachment. You can have an attachment which is healthy, you can have anxious attachment or avoidant attachment. And, it can swing in any of these. The healthy attachment, both the giver and the receiver feel good. The giver, doesn't feel like they are being wasting themselves, and the receiver, they're not being overwhelmed. The anxious attachment is when, as we just heard, is somebody who wants to solve everybody else's problem, and then if things don't change, then they are upset or they are, unhappy. They want really to solve the problem. I want to fix your things, and this should be like this. And there is the avoidant attachment, which happens when people have an issue with caring, and they get hurt maybe, and then they carry in themselves a pride of not caring at all. They do care inside, but they are avoidant. This is where who cares come from, and so all of these have to be regulated.
Yeah, it makes sense, I think, especially when you bring it into our language of the attachment styles, where a lot of times we're looking at because we struggle to regulate our own overwhelm, we find these different ways, whether it's like, I'm going to try to regulate it through controlling you and making your stuff better. I'm going to try to regulate it by avoiding it and not getting too close to it or overwhelmed by it. You're saying it shows up from a lot of different angles.
Exactly.
And I know that you just wrote a book on the power of caring. And in that book, you talk about what it means to care wisely. And I think that it would be helpful if we could talk about some tangible ways that couples, partners, parents, friends could care wisely in their relationships.
The bottom line of caring wisely is to understand also, the book starts with explaining how we are wired and explaining the philosophy behind caring, why it works and how different spiritual systems have explained it, and different religious systems and different philosophical systems. And then it brings in that consciousness paradigm, which explains that we are ultimately all connected and that every act of care sends ripples and those ripples come back. And I explained this from both a philosophical but also a scientific perspectives in terms of action and reaction and general worldview. And so this is kind of the baseline so that one understands what caring is about and already starts thinking in a way that is not just reflex or just performance as an obligation, a moral obligation, but start thinking from the inside out. And the first thing then that is most important to do is to accept to care for oneself and know that self-care is not selfishness. Self-care is the best way in order to be able to care for anything, for yourself and for others. Self-care for the body, self-care for the mind, self-care for your routine, even under circumstances that are demanding on the outside, to be clear about what I call conscious caring. And conscious caring means not reflex caring and not performance caring. It's caring where you know what is yours to do. So, what is mine to do today? We can even every day ask this question in the morning. What is mine to do today? And what is not mine to do today? So there is a discernment here, a sense of being a master of one's own life and not acting just because reflex happens and something happens and then get out of ourselves. Always be settled within, have the space within, and these techniques of simple things to do, breathing, take a breathing, discuss this thing, think about it, meditate. If you can, learn transcendental meditation. That's my personal advice. Or do these simple things and accept not to carry. Accept not to carry. And that is something very important. By convincing and knowing from yourself that the best you can help with is to be having less of a load, less overloaded, that you can actually help in the best possible way. So there is this discernment, which I call, there is this trust also, which is important. And I hope through the book, as the reader goes through it, they'll understand that there is orderliness in life and in nature. And there is a whole chapter where I discuss what happens under, accidents and things that are, we call, unfair and suffering. So that's a whole different issue. But I discuss also freedom and determinism, randomness, choice. Do we have a choice, etc. So it's part of, how to understand reality and how to understand a worldview that helps us to see things. So trust that every action you do ripples. And this is a law in physics, this is a law in life. And therefore, trust that small acts of care can go a long way also. You don't have to wake up in the morning and feel the burden of solving the world's problems. Otherwise, you feel unable to do anything. Just think what is mine to do and do it. These small things are there that help guide us into conscious caring, what I call conscious caring.
Tony, I love how you were describing this interdependent nature of care for oneself and care for others, because the worry that immediately was coming up in my mind about how I know people can be fast to receive this information of like, oh, I just need to care for others and that will have this ripple effect, is that then we neglect to check in with our own capacity. And I really heard you naming, if I'm grounded in what is mine to do, what is my responsibility, so I'm managing my capacity, it's not that I'm then saying, oh, that's not mine to do. That's not my responsibility. Like I can't help anybody with anything, right? It's like I'm managing my capacity so that I have margin, so that I can help from margin without going into overwhelm.
Beautiful. That's so beautifully clarified. Thank you. Yes, exactly that. And caring is natural. Again, when we are on the settled level, don't even have to make a big effort to care. Caring is not effortful. We all care, The child finds something, he runs, mommy, mommy, look, look, discover this. They want to teach, they want to share, they want to do, you are walking in the street, a child drops the ice cream cone, you want to help. These are natural things. So never feel that if you are settled within, that you will be distant. Your care will be much more meaningful and natural.
Well, and that's why I heard you say earlier that I loved was we're not working to be performative or reflexive in our caring. And it made me think even like just like reactive, right? Like it's like, oh, everything's on fire. And so now what do I do to get everything off, out of the crisis that it's in? And it's more that I'm having this consistent practice of regulating myself so that when things arise in this way, I have a stable presence in my relationship that's different than maybe what this reactive or performative, I'm doing it because this is what I'm supposed to do, would traditionally look like for couples.
Exactly. That's why I often go back to that point that true conscious caring is something that you do from inside, not something that is, the world drawing you into. The world can draw you, of course, and you can do it. But when you care really consciously, it's you're caring from within.
I don't know if we even have the time to get into this, and Colter and Cayla certainly can redirect me if this isn't where we want to go. But I am just so curious about some of the science when you were describing, Tony, this isn't just my opinion. It's like we have some science that really reflects this like reality as consciousness, and maybe even just defining like where is that line between spirituality, because I can imagine some listeners being like, oh, well, that's like not my spiritual framework, and so like where does some of the science come into that?
You can never prove something as abstract as personal consciousness and our consciousness as a whole. For one thing, we are conscious beings, but we cannot be sure that anything else is conscious because it's not something you see or you touch. It's something, though, you can experience through the effects of it. When you widen your consciousness, when you settle down within, your physiology is balanced. And there are more than 700 scientific research studies published in the best journals around the world that show how transcendental meditation, which is a simple mental technique, improves all aspects of mind, body, behavior, and even effects in society. So what I used in terms of coming to that conclusion is a convergence of factors, even from the most objective scientific study, theoretically and practically. Theoretically, objective modern science is looking at what is reality made of. And they kept going deeper into the atom, then the particle, then deeper into finding that there is a quantum field or quantum mechanics, and that objects are not localized actually in time and space, that, consciousness collapses the observer collapses the object into a specific value. And until now, scientists are debating and do not have an answer to that from a physicalist point of view. And also, they found that as you go deeper in nature, there is more and more unification. So what we used to think is electricity and magnetism, these are two different things because they manifest differently. Then, Nobel Prize was given to scientists who unified them. So now we have the electromagnetic field, and they are one and the same field. And as you go deeper and deeper into reality, into nature, we have now what is called a unified field theory, which says there is a unification ultimately. So all these differences on the surface, they come from one field that then manifests as differences in the same way the ocean manifests as waves and beyond, of course, into specificity.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one factor. Another factor, we've done research, 116 different scientific research that shows when a small group of people practice this transcending together, there is a reduction in violence in society, reduction in crime, reduction in accidents of the road, reduction in hospital admissions. It's really unbelievable on the surface level. But when you start putting things together and you start putting the spiritual side also, what the big spiritual teachings have said, humans are made in the image of God from the Bible, the kingdom of heaven is within you. All the traditions, even Islam, you consider yourself an atom in which the whole universe has folded itself. In the Vedic tradition, you are totality, wholeness, Buddhism, Taoism, and all of these things. And you look at the mind-body problem and trying to solve fundamental questions about life and living and suffering and determinism and freedom and decision-making and meaning of life, etc. When you put all of these things together and they converge to give you a sense of assurance that if you say that consciousness is primary, that there is a field of consciousness that appears as many, then when you have in science a theory or a paradigm that solves many, many enigma and many, many problems and big philosophical questions and big, huge things that have not been resolved, then you are more assured that you are on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we come to that. Is it spiritual? Yes, depending how you define spirituality. Spirituality is that which is not physical, which is not material and energy. So love is spiritual. Happiness is spiritual. Inner subjective, deep feeling of being, of wellness is spiritual. It doesn't have to be religious necessarily, although religion has its own, of course. Religious is based on belief of a power sitting somewhere that controls our life. Fine, it's, no contradiction in this case. But so that is where spirituality and science actually come together.
Thank you for that explanation. That was so satisfying to
That was very
hear
helpful.
how some of those converge. Yeah.
As you began to speak, I was kind of forming my next question in my head, which I'll kind of say, but I do feel like it got answered because I've spent seasons of my life, dare I say, obsessing over those questions, and it gets so big and can become overwhelming. And I was going to ask, what do we anchor back to when we just start to feel like this grain of sand in the universe? And I don't even want to answer what I took from that, because I imagine other people are going to take something different from that, and I want them to feel anchored to that as well. I do think the one thing worth mentioning is looking for the center of the Venn diagram with all of these different philosophies and spiritualities and religions and research, that there is kind of a center of the Venn diagram that points us back to some of what I think you were describing. And I think I don't want to say any more because I think it was so well said and so beautifully said, and such a great place for us to end our conversation today. But, Tony, thank you so much for all of this. For our listeners out there, How can they work with you? Are people working with you? Are they buying your book? Like, what's a way that people can further engage with you?
I have a website, drtonynader.com, drtonynader.com.
Hmm.
The book will be released in a short time, this month, July. You can pre-order it through a website also. It's called thepowerofcaringbook.com.
Hmm.
And all those who pre-order, we want the book to be known. They get my webinars. We have a series of webinars about love, loss, relationships, how to care across the political divides, the big questions that you mentioned. One of them, maybe, does the universe care? Is there somebody who cares out there? And like that, the meaning of life, all about money, about finances, about future. So these are there, will be there, and you can also order directly from all bookstores and book sales, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc.
Yeah,
So
beautiful.
thank you so much for having me. It's a joy. And indeed, we are a dot, but in which the whole universe is there. That's why we are, told that we are in the image of the divine, that we are grand, and we can find that within ourselves.
I think that's beautiful to anchor to. Dr. Tony Nader, thank you so much. All our listeners, thank you for stopping by. We will see you all next week.